General quarters. All hands man your battle stations.
Welcome to WETSU, a Battleship New Jersey podcast. My name is Marshal Spevak, and I'm honored and privileged to be the CEO of the Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial and the host of this podcast. I'm joined today by Commander Steve Halle, the Plankowner Commanding Officer of the USS New Jersey, SSN 796, the sister ship of the Battleship and the third ship in U.S. Navy history to bear the name of the Garden State. Commander Halle enlisted in the United States Navy in 1999 and was selected for the Nuclear Enlisted Commissioning Program. He graduated from the University of Illinois and was commissioned as a naval officer in August 2004. After a distinguished career that spans multiple warships and positions, he reported to Norfolk, Virginia in December 2022 as he relieved Commander Jared Smith as CO of Pre-Commissioning Unit New Jersey, and upon the boat's commissioning on 14 September 2024 at Naval Weapons Station Earl, he assumed command of the USS New Jersey. On 7 December of 2024, he was relieved by Commander Ron Simmons after a highly successful 2-year tour of duty as skipper of the USS New Jersey. So let's welcome to the podcast the 32nd captain of a United States ship named New Jersey, and our friend Commander Steve Halle.
Hey, thanks for having me, Marshall. It's an honor and privilege to be on the podcast and supporting the WETSU motto.
Thank you. There's so much to talk about. Commissioning week, the submarine, the battleship, but I kind of just wanted to go back and sort of start from the beginning. And the first question that I always ask here is, why did you join the Navy?
Oh, that's a great question. For me, following high school, higher education was sort of on the frontier. How to get there was sort of the question. Didn't have a lot of probably amazing scholarship options and a lot of ability to pay for college. So I sort of looked to the Navy, looked for what education benefits they could provide, and an opportunity to get a little bit of a different experience, just life experience. And I actually started out looking into the Marine Corps. Marine Corps, smoked the ASVAB tests, and they basically recommended me going down the street to talk to the Navy recruiters when I was talking about what kind of competitive schooling and teaching they had prior for me, getting my first assignment. Once they saw my scores, they sort of just recommended going the Navy route, and that's where I learned about the nuclear program, being a nuclear operator. And so my original enlistment was to be a nuclear machinist mate. So I saw that opportunity to get, about 2 years of schooling, but then also, a once in a lifetime kind of experience operating on submarines. And so that's sort of why I chose that route. Additionally, the concept of serving in uniform and service, I think I appreciated that. I admired that. I looked up to people that were in uniform. And so I think, me choosing that route kind of delivered on that as well.
You're the second person so far on this podcast to say they went to join the Marines first. So Admiral Tucker, when we had him on, said he went to the Marine recruiting office. They filled up their slots for the day. They didn't need anybody. And so they sent him down to the Navy recruiter, and the rest is history. So you enlisted in 1999. You were selected for the very competitive, what they call the Seaman to Admiral program, Stay 21, as it's better known as. How did you know you wanted to become an officer, and sort of what was it like to join that program?
Yeah, so at first, I don't even know that I fully understood really the ranks and service that much to really understand the divide between officer and enlisted. When you join the military, and if you're a little bit naive to some of that, you kind of don't understand that. There was some great mentors that I had kind of in the training pipeline, and some of the instructors that were at the power school, where I originally enrolled in the officer kind of application process, that, they kind of pulled aside and said, hey, Steve, you'd probably be a really good officer candidate. So it was really kind of those, junior, officers that were in the instructor capacity that kind of pulled me aside to kind of encourage me to go that route. But, to be perfectly honest, besides the opportunity to go to college, I didn't really understand much of the difference between sort of the officer and enlisted ranks. But it was kind of, like I said, someone kind of going out of their way to kind of pull me under their wing and say, hey, you should apply for this.
That's great. You get assigned to a ship. The first boat that you get assigned to is USS Missouri as the weapons officer.
First one was Ohio.
Oh, the Ohio.
So my division officer tour that started in 2006 was the USS Ohio, SSGN. So I got there actually the day it returned to service. Instead of being an SSBN, it established itself as an SSGN. It did sort of a recommissioning almost.
Okay.
So that was my first tour. My second tour was on USS Missouri.
So you were on Missouri. You were the WEPS, and of course Missouri being another sister ship of an Iowa class battleship. Was there any connection between that you saw, noticed? Obviously, it was in service for some time before you were assigned there. But was there any connection between that boat and the state of Missouri?
Yeah, similar to New Jersey, but probably not as deep of, I'd say, kind of a foundation. Missouri did have some ties back to the battleship. In fact, it was a little bit more difficult because at the time of delivery, Missouri was on the East Coast and the battleship was already out in Hawaii. And so that's a long distance to kind of have that same kind of heritage kind of in the delivery of the ship. But very soon thereafter, Missouri actually got home port shifted. So it was really awesome to watch Missouri, the submarine, driving alongside the battleship as they changed home port to Hawaii. But we had the motto, Mighty Mo. So we would say, Hoo-yah, Mighty Mo. And the Mighty Mo was a tie back to the, battleship. And we also, very, very often kind of referred back to the heritage of the battleship, similar to New Jersey. And then even on the crest, similar to the New Jersey crest, the Missouri sits on it in the background, and the silhouette of it. So a lot of similarities between New Jersey and Missouri. Both, the top two decorated, Iowa class battleships. So it's kind of neat being on both of them and seeing the similarities there.
You went on to be the XO on the USS Hartford, SSN 768. What was it like to go from your divisional, department head to, being, I guess, a prospective executive officer and then an executive officer?
Yeah, so not all submariners have been on, a lot of different classes. So by the time I did my executive officer tour, that was the third class and a new class for me. So there's always a little bit of a learning curve when you first arrive and getting up to speed on that particular hull form design and some of the differences. But I have to say, the 688 class, Los Angeles, Fast Attack, they really did some great engineering on that boat. And I was pretty blown away about, what their capabilities was, even though it was an older submarine. And, we did a lot of great things on Hartford. Probably the most memorable during my time there, was support ICE exercise. So ICEX 2018.
That was my next question.
Yeah. So Hartford had just done ICEX 2016. So it's not too common to get to do back-to-back ICE exercises. So we didn't really think we were in the running for that. But we were selected to do that before our deployment. And that is a very, we only send 2 submarines to do that, every other year. We were also on the year in which, cause it also alternates if we shoot torpedoes. And so I also had the opportunity to shoot torpedoes under ice. So that whole collective exercise, going up to the North Pole, going to ice camp, shooting torpedoes, surfacing through the ice. It's really for a submariner, that's a very unique opportunity. And so having that opportunity and getting to do that. And what was really neat about, surfacing at the North Pole, and actually the ice pilot had told me this. He's like, hey, why don't you go walk out about 200 yards that way? And I was like, why is that? He's like, because I bet if you stand there, no one has ever stood at those geographical coordinates, just by sheer, odds of, where people have walked at the North Pole. And so that was pretty neat. So pretty much everything that was associated with, operations under the ice and the ice camp itself and ice exercise, it was really just sort of fascinating. Everything we learned on that entire operation.
It's funny because now, we're recording this in, mid-January. President-elect Trump has made an emphasis about, Greenland and the Arctic. You've been there, you've deployed, were part of ICEX. I mean, how much is the Arctic, and for all the conversations I see now, the CNO even has an Arctic medal for those who served up there. Is the Arctic sort of the next, frontier, or is, how is the Navy sort of positioning itself to sort of deal with those kind of threats?
Well, so I think we really first started positioning ourselves to have an unlimited reach, and with nuclear propulsion, right, that allows us to stay submerged sort of indefinitely. Just basically the sanity of the crew and the food we have on board. And so that development of Nautilus and then all the future classes has really sort of opened up that aperture to allow for the Arctic operations. So we've really been doing that since the early 60s. And so I think that's sort of a testament just to the submarine force and its capabilities in general. And I think what we're seeing is that concept that we put into work, in the 50s and 60s, of the previous century, is really paying off, so that we can kind of continue to validate that we can operate, in sort of all aspects of operations all around the world. And I think, us going up there every, 2 years and proving the concept of operations just goes on to support that. It's interesting you brought up the Arctic Operations Medal. So you'd be interested to know which submarine actually requested to upgrade the Arctic Ribbon to the Arctic Medal.
Really?
And the answer would be the Hartford in 2018. So that was my commanding officer and I, along with some great ideas from the crew and designs, actually, we submitted for that Arctic Operations Medal. And so, the Air Force has an Arctic, or I think it's actually a Arctic operations that the Air Force has. It's a similar medal. There's also an Antarctica operations medal. And so what was sort of lacking was the fact that there was only a ribbon awarded to certain Navy operations. So we had sort of, our conjecture anyways on submitting for it was not all Arctic operations are similar.
Right.
And, submarine operations or long-time operations on the ice, it's pretty arduous stuff. And in fact, if, normally our emergency recovery method is to emergency surface to to get fresh air, or if there's a fire or something. And in the Arctic, environment, that's not an option.
Right.
So our sort of safe haven is taken away. And so, some great ideas from the crew. Some of the crew members, myself, even the captain had some, insight on the designs, and we submitted that up. It just took several years to actually get that over the line. So it was really kind of neat.
Navy time, though, I guess.
Yeah. So Captain Matt Fanning, who's currently the commanding officer of the submarine school, he was one of the first to get awarded it by the Chief of Naval Operations. Along with, this year they sort of they let the whole Navy know this year at Ice Camp when the CNO was on board. I believe it was Indiana. They had presented a plaque to kind of say, hey, this has been approved and your crew is going to be one of the first to award it. But it was actually a lot of hard work by the crew of Hartford back
awesome.
in ICEX 2018. So.
Where at a later episode, either this season or next season, there's one member of the New Jersey State Legislature who was a Navy vet. I don't know if you met him during commissioning week. He served 2 tours, full deployments in the Arctic on USS Whale. So we're going to be talking to him and getting a full scope of that either later this season or next season. But
oh, great.
So then you end up at the New Jersey, getting command of the New Jersey. Do you remember where you were, what you were doing when you got the news that you were getting your first command and it was on this pre-commissioning unit?
Yeah, so it was, I can't remember, I gotta remember which year it was. But it was just before Thanksgiving. So if I relieved in 22, it was Thanksgiving of 21. And I was with my wife's family and, got the call from the admiral. So the way that they do submarine commands is the first flag officer in your chain of command that's a submariner calls the prospective commanding officer to inform them, hey, this is the command you've been selected for. So I got my call, and it was a little bit unexpected. I knew it was supposed to happen about the next 2 weeks, but they made it a goal to get it out before the actual Thanksgiving holiday. And yeah, I was elated. Not only where I'd be assigned, but kind of the role of delivering New Jersey on sea trials and likely doing the commissioning. That was all sort of like, both interested. I was very interested in doing that. But also I kind of felt like, it's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so, I was very grateful that I got.
Did you know going into it that you would likely end up not on the New Jersey specifically, but on a pre-commissioning unit rather than something that was already a boat that was already in service?
No, I didn't know. Once I started, once I basically had made the commitment to go to command, and then you get sort of slated to which submarine positions would be available. No, I didn't really know what that looked like, whether or not there'd even be a pre-commissioning unit on sort of the docket on the roster. So yeah, that was kind of once our class load, our group of selectees got listed out. I saw New Jersey was a potential submarine to go to, and I was pretty excited about it. Plus, I think, as you know, Alyssa and her family, we have some ties to New Jersey, and so for all those reasons, it was just a really great fit.
You said during commissioning week, when you first became CO, you looked at a lot of the records, and you didn't believe how many namesake trips the crew took to New Jersey over these last years, but you were happy to be proven wrong, obviously. Did you sort of know, or did it sort of dawn on you at that time? Maybe there was something special about this boat, its relationship with the state, and obviously probably realizing there was a battleship also, with the same name.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I didn't believe it at first. I just sort of thought it was okay. Every submarine has a relationship with their state. They do namesake visits, and it wasn't until I think I got to tour the battleship, B got to go on kind of my first trip as a namesake, and it was actually to Elizabeth. Was a lot of the majority of that trip. That sort of solidified for it to me that, hey, this is something different, something special. And just the general, everyone that I spoke to in the state, everywhere I stopped, whether or not that was a restaurant or to get coffee, they were just, amazed to see me in uniform. They were very grateful for my service. And then once they found out that I was associated with the submarine named after the state. And so, very quickly I went from, it's probably your standard vanilla relationship with the namesake to, no, this is something special and something different. And then as, we started to plan and get more, solid dates and times and location for the commissioning, it was even more, very transparent that this commission was going to be something special. And, obviously you're a member of the commission committee, so and you get it. But the motto of best commissioning ever, really, the committee, yourself, everyone, really outdid themselves because, what was it, nearly 5,000 people on the pier, a flyover from Air National Guard. I mean, you name it, there's a lot of stuff there that is just really special. And so like I said, that it took me a while to realize that's what it was going to culminate in, but you were telling me from the stance, and then specifically on the namesake visit, from what the records kind of indicated was New Jersey had done more namesake trips to the state than any other PCU. In fact, someone had said than the last 3 PCUs combined. Wow. We had done more to that state, to New Jersey. So that was great.
That's awesome. Earlier this year in June, or earlier in 2024, in June, you and several members of the submarine crew traveled to Paulsboro and joined us here on the Battleship on our second leg of our what we're referring to as our summer river cruise back to Camden. Your first time underway on the Battleship, first time the Battleship's been underway, in this dry docking project in 25 years. What was that experience like? Was it what you expected? Just want to get your thoughts on being underway with us.
Yeah, no. So first and foremost, right? So when you're named after the state of New Jersey, when you're rung aboard, and I'm sure you know this, and some of your listeners, probably do as well. But so they refer to the captain ringing you on board as the name of the vessel. So New Jersey arriving. Me having been rung aboard the submarine, a lot of that nostalgia and sort of like initial, this is pretty, the awestruckness of it. It had, pretty much, dwindled after a time. You sort of, you forget about that sometimes when you're showing up to work daily. But when you're approaching the battleship, when you're, your normal 9 to 5ers on a submarine and, getting ring aboard, the battleship and then still, referring to as New Jersey arriving, that was a moment. That took me back a little bit. And then, the submarine, I think we started to say sometimes we refer to it as the silent J. We gotta see how that sticks over time. But it's, a lot of it is below the waterline. So as you walk aboard, you don't feel this,
right.
Several hundred feet of firepower and turrets sticking up. And so just that whole moment of being rung on board and saying New Jersey arriving, but then looking at, the battleship, that was definitely something special. And then, the fact that we, then proceeded to get it underway and, Joe Benton and the McAllister team got that tug, the tug power, got it going in a current. And I think the GPS speed was well over 8 knots at some point. And so when I looked at beam, from the bridge and actually saw, the buildings, everything, that was another part of the trip that I won't forget. That, wow, like I can't even see the tugs from the bridge. So it feels like we're just underway on the battleship.
Yeah.
No, so that was great. And then even just getting to hear some of the stories about the other part of the trip, with Admiral Tucker on board. And just seeing all the volunteers, the crew, everyone who was helping out, just kind of alive just as much as the ship was underway. No, it was pretty memorable. And my crew, the ones that got to join me absolutely loved it. So, I think there was, a couple different opportunities for them to shoot off some of not only the signal cannon, but one of the quad turrets they shot around off. And one of my favorite photos actually, so kind of bringing this full circle to the WETSU flag hanging up behind you is, me and several members of the crew got to hold that up. I think right there by turret 2. Yep. And, it's probably one of my, favorite photos in command with the crew there. We're in our whites. That whole day was great. Pretty sure that was June 20th, maybe.
Yep, June 20th. That's right.
Yeah. So,
and I'm pretty sure that picture was in the commissioning day book.
I think it did make it.
Yeah. That's your flag. Yeah.
Absolutely.
When you are still the skipper of a PCU, are you still New Jersey arriving, even if it's not a commissioned vessel, or is it something different?
Yeah, no, they still use the same, verbiage on that. There's a lot of, there's some very specific things that, when you're pre-commissioned, there's certain things like funding and, there's some other administrative things. We don't have an FPO address. So there's a lot of things that still have to occur at the commissioning, but some of the, pomp and circumstance, some of the traditions and courtesies, still kind of occur even though you're not, fully commissioned. The biggest being, the commissioning pennant. So it's pretty neat. Yes. After we got, commissioned, I kept taking selfies with the commissioning pennant because it's like, oh, they're finally on the flagstaff. So.
Yes. Well, we've talked a lot about being a pre-commissioning unit commander. What does it take to get a crew and a boat ready for commissioning, sea trials and certifications? Can you give, the listeners here a little bit about the process of, shipyard to the Navy accepting the boat to all the different sea trials and certifications and things like that? A lot of us now have, some of the, different sea trial posters, hanging in our office and stuff like that. But, we'd, love to hear from your perspective about sort of that process and what it really takes to get a boat ready to be commissioned to enter, the active duty fleet. Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so none of my tours previous to this were, in delivering a new submarine, and so I was blissfully ignorant as to what that challenge looked like until having done it. The so through the construction phase, as the ship systems are turned over and completed, they're kind of turned over from the shipyard teams that not only build and construct them but then also test them. So we do kind of a joint walkthrough system turnover. And so slowly as the systems kind of come on for full operation and turned over to the crew then, kind of inherits them. So they kind of sign for them. They validate their operability, and then they start being able to not only maintain them, operate them, but build proficiency on them. So a lot of the weeks and months, and in our case, even over a year, leading between the actual sea trials, the crew is working on training, but also working on proficiency in operating those systems. The tricky part is manning the submarine in a manner that, the crew gets there and that system turnover starts. Well, our nominal manning structure, didn't work out well because that was through the COVID era. And so the construction that got delayed kind of through COVID, caused a lot more personnel turnover specific to New Jersey. And so what made the New Jersey delivery kind of specifically sort of arduous was we had a lot of crew members that were coming up to, it was time for them to rotate, but they had been the one who had maybe accepted the system or became proficient or qualified to operate that system. And then we replaced them with a brand new sailor who had never been to sea on a Virginia class.
Right.
And so a lot of that time that leads up to that is you're sending a lot of sailors that newly report to New Jersey. You're sending them on other submarines to get proficiency operating at sea. So what it really looked like from when I took over was, we basically, show up, and a lot of the crew had never been to sea before, because they hadn't had an opportunity to go on some of the other delivered Virginia classes and get proficiency operating at sea. And so, I show up and it's a lot of new crew. I've never operated the systems before, and we're getting ready to go to sea trials in 6 to 7 months. So a lot of our focus was going to the trainers and simulators we have in port, that allows them to build some proficiency. It's not the full thing of driving the submarine at sea, but it gets it's there 60-70% of the way. And then, we did a lot of what we call fast cruises. So we simulate the submarines underway. So we take a break from the construction side. So we ask the construction team that's doing some of the final details for delivery, we ask them to, hey, give us some unencumbered time on the ship where it's just the crew. And so we kind of simulate like we're underway. So we operate the systems as much as we can. We man the watches just like they would be manned underway. And really sometimes, because there's no windows on the submarine, you don't even know what time of day it is you can almost trick the entire crew into thinking, yeah, we're actually underway. Because, stable course, speed, and depth, the submarine doesn't move a whole lot. So
Right.
it can be pretty tricky. And so, really focused on, training the crew. So in parallel with finishing up the construction and testing, we were really trying to work on the training piece. And then you sort of, one of the big final milestones is you actually start up the reactor. You do the final testing on the reactor, steam system. And then once that's all certified, it's basically, validating all the forward systems, the non-engineering systems work and function. Once those sort of two major milestones are complete, the crew gets a last minute sort of certification to make sure that there hasn't been high crew turnover, everyone's qualified and proficient to operate the systems. And then you invite the admiral on board. So we had Admiral Houston's first Alpha Sea trials. So he comes on board, does sort of an inspection of the ship. We give him an operational brief, and then we set sail for Alpha Sea trials. And so it is a lot of work.
Fastest sea trials, right? Is that right?
Yeah, so Admiral Houston did validate that it is the fastest Virginia class Alpha Sea trials on record.
Awesome. That's awesome.
We just can't talk about what that number is.
No, that's fine. We don't have to get into those details. I think another question that we sort of get often when people are talking about the submarine, and it's obviously a little bit different here, on a battleship, on the surface force, but just for the average listener, what is it? what are dolphins, and what does it take to be qualified and to get your dolphins, and what does that mean, for a sailor to earn their dolphins?
Yeah. So the dolphins is our listed and officer warfare pin. And normally it takes anywhere, and I'll kind of talk about averages, but enlisted dolphins normally 6 months to a year. Officer dolphins anywhere from 9 months to 14 or 15 months of a qualification path. So it's required for you to be qualified something both in port and something at sea, as well as sort of be a master in all things submarine. There's kind of some core competencies to that qualification, because we don't have the luxury of having separate damage control men to come in and fight fires and do damage control efforts. Every submariner is a damage controlman, so we have to respond to fire or flooding and any sort of casualty on board. So there's a core sort of competency that to earn your dolphins, you understand all the systems on board that would be for the safe recovery and damage control, firefighting. So that's kind of one core competency. We also just have some systems that are very special for submariners. So, that's kind of our, ballasting system, our ability to do emergency blow. So all the systems that are sort of, unique to the design and operation of the submarine, hydraulic systems are pretty unique. And then obviously all of our life support systems. So kind of that core competency to making a submariner, those systems and all their operations, at least at, kind of the face value of how they operate. And then, you also have kind of the sort of your specialty of just understanding, hey, how does the engineering team work? How does the weapons department work? And ultimately, a lot of the warfare qualifications include, hey, how do you put weapons on, warheads on foreheads, so to speak? And so a lot of the Dolphin qualifications include, hey, how do the weapon systems operate? How do the torpedo tube systems work? How do the torpedo functions? And so it's, in addition to all of your at-sea watch stations that you're qualifying, so each rating, and even officers have, hey, this is the time frame that you should qualify for your next. So while you're doing that, you're also kind of concurrently qualifying your warfare qualifications. So the Dolphins, they mean a lot, and it's a lot of hard work. It's months and months of work. It's it makes you a subject matter expert sort of in submarines, and so. A lot of guys, they get a kind of emotional, earning their dolphins, and there's a reason for that. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of pride in the dolphins. There's probably over 20 tattoos on board New Jersey of, submarine dolphins. And so, it's a kind of it's something that, we really put a lot of ownership on them earning. And then kind of once you earn your dolphins, it kind of sets you apart. And so, there's a lot of junior sailors that show up, and, from day one, they're looking up to sailors that have earned their fish dolphins. And there's a lot of pride in that.
That's a great answer. 'Cause just like you said, I mean, I've seen just in observing the New Jersey crew, the pride that they take in those that are wearing those who have qualified or who have earned their dolphins. So I wanted to make sure I asked that for people to have a better understanding of what exactly that means.
Yeah. And we try to also place a lot of emphasis on the ceremony itself too, when you've now pinned on your dolphins. So it's a signed certificate by me. Normally the qualification process involves including the commanding officer. It's done through a board. So a lot of times sailors are doing anywhere from normally it's about a 60-minute to 90-minute technical oral board, where they got to validate their knowledge. That board is normally chaired by 3 people.
Fellow crew members on the submarine or outside of the submarine?
Both. For officers, they do an interview with a commanding officer that's not attached to the submarine. For enlisted, it's, normally fellow crew members. But it's an officer, a chief, and then, typically a petty officer that's not in their department. So normally if it's an engineering sailor, normally it's a weapons department, senior petty officer. So, it's a pretty, again, pretty arduous technical oral board. But when we present the dolphins, we ensure that normally the sailor has, either their mentor or family member, pin them on. It's typically pinned with reading of the certificate. And then, we typically, and I think this is a heritage that's pretty common in the submarine force. We take Thunder Below, and, that book has a lot of the World War II excerpts from, several submarines that, have some really good, Bill, give me a spread of 3 on the lead target and, 2 minutes apart and third one blows and boom. And so that you read that right before the certificate. And then, such is the stuff that submarines are made of. Today we welcome another to our midst. We ring the klaxon or the diving alarm, and, hear the whole crew holler. And, it kind of brings that, esprit de corps to kind of the moment for that sailor. And normally there's some, like I said, there might be some, personal emotion, a lot of times when they receive those dolphins.
That's great. I love that. Going back just for a second before we get into commissioning week, this submarine has sort of become famous a little bit, subject to a lot of really incredible media, in which I thought and believe that the crew and yourself really just came off just exceptional. This is the first ever first ever submarine built for a mixed gender crew. Obviously women have been serving on submarines for a while, but this is the first boat that was built with that in mind. You had big features on ESPN, on CBS, a couple other places I saw. What was it like to sort of be the first on that front? And certainly I obviously had a chance to interact and to meet and become friendly with a lot of the female sailors on board, who I just thought were absolutely fantastic, who really just showed a tremendous amount of pride in what they were doing and being sort of the first in what they're doing in some respects. So from your perspective, just wanted to hear about that.
Yeah, I think most of the women on the crew, what they will tell you is they would prefer not to have any sort of spotlight driven on that, because at the end of the day, what's going well on New Jersey is that when I had left, like all the motivation and all the sort of camaraderie, they don't look at it as like, oh, we've broken the mold and we've got integrated. It's a lot of hardworking sailors that just want to get the job done, want to improve their warfighting readiness, and really to them it's sort of like gender agnostic. Like, right. Let's just go be professionals and let's go get our job done. So I think a lot of times they almost prefer the media not focus on that, because like for the crew, that's not their focus. They would rather talk about, hey, let's talk about this great commissioning or the great things that Jersey's done. But I think that sort of humbled approach. I did hear
that from the crew too, by the way. I got that vibe. Yeah.
But I think that's the humbled approach, that they realize that that's not the important thing. Now it's important, I think, for the Navy, and I think it's important that we a lot of those, any barriers, to that diversity are sort of removed. But I just think that, the crew, that's not focus. But I think, one of the coolest photos, and, I'll have to see if I can get it tied into the clip, is, all the women in my crew were on the bow of the submarine, and they just sort of took a candid photo. And, I think it wasn't until I saw that photo that I realized, oh, wow, that's something special. Like, and it kind of looks like, if you made it black and white and looked at vintage, it just looked like, a bunch of submarine sailors hanging out, right? But just to see that the number of them women, I had gone all of my submarine tours until that point having just all male crews. And so, for me to have a, 20 some odd year career, and then me show up and do my commanding officer tour and just have, 40 women on board, and really, there's always challenges, but for the most part, those challenges weren't much different than an all male crew. And so, I think it was just sort of, that's a cool testament to how we've sort of just removed the barrier of diversity, and we're just, hey, what's the next challenge on the horizon? And I'd say most of the crew doesn't even really like to focus on that too much.
Well,
I don't know.
I
Did
don't
that
think
kind
I've
of
seen.
answer what we were
Yeah,
talking
no, it
about?
did. And if you do have that picture and could send to us, we could put it, we could put
Yeah,
it on here. Cause I don't think I've seen that. So,
it's great. Yeah.
that's great. So let's talk about commissioning week for a few minutes. During commissioning week, it was a Wednesday night, with the commissioning on Saturday. We hosted the submarine crew on board here on the Battleship for a special ship-to-ship event, or ship-to-boat event, I should say. The ceremonial passing of the watch, as we were saying, from one New Jersey to the next. I think in my 8+ year affiliation with, the Battleship, it was probably one of my favorite nights aboard. What was it like from your all's perspective? I know we did a lot of namesake visits, as we talked about, but to have that many sailor, maybe that was, 5 sailors at a time, 10 sailors at a time, and probably most realistically, they've already rotated off. But to have that many crew members here on board at the same time, would you love to hear sort of just from your perspective about the crew's thoughts on that night?
Yeah. Well, no, first of all, that night, it was an amazing night because it was beautiful weather.
Yeah,
If you recall the sunset,
yes.
kind of Philadelphia in the background. I couldn't ask for a better night. And like you said, it was, we had everyone from the crew with the exception of the few personnel that were in our duty section. And that's actually where we got some of the best crew photos. When I have been in command are both, kind of along the quay wall there, with the ship in the background. And then, you'd had the great idea to do kind of a throwback, to put everyone up on the turrets. So that has been very special to me. So I think, and by the way, that was actually, we celebrated, the Navy birthday.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw the photos on that, but that was the photo we, elected to put on the cake.
I did see that.
Celebrate.
Yes. I think,
Yeah.
yes, I did see that on Facebook or somewhere. Someone said that.
Yeah. So needless to say, to answer your question, that definitely stands out. And just in general, I felt like, we'd kept saying there's this, close tie, between the Battleship and the submarine. And I think that night was just kind of the night that we got to celebrate them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I thought that was really special. And I also just thought it was a great party and well-hosted event, and a lot of the sailors are still talking about it. I think you were able to convince the Cobb to dance with the crew. The XO was there dancing with his kids.
Yes.
There's a lot of good, fun, both camaraderie and, just all out. It was just a great event. And just like I said, highlighted the, kind of the great relationship. I remember my engineer who had not yet done a namesake visit. He came back and he had a big smile ear to ear on his face. And, he was talking about the reduction gears. He was talking about like how much of the engine room looked clean and how much it looked similar to his engine room. And yeah, so like there was just those little moments throughout that whole day that were really special. And then all the sailors that, hadn't got to do it on some of the specialized tours, they had that opportunity. And I think, everyone's, kind of left that event talking about like, we should do this more often. So no, it was great.
And then obviously during the commissioning ceremony itself, having Admiral Tucker as a part of our last, CO coined the term WETSU, hand over the long glass to you to set the watch, paraphrasing the words of another former captain here, Captain Peniston, the ship's CO during Vietnam. His famous words, which we recite often: rest well, yet sleep lightly, and hear the call if sounded to provide firepower for freedom. That firepower for freedom, the same motto that now adorns the submarine as well. So, and then what was it like to have Admiral Tucker as a part of commissioning day?
Yeah. So first off, the one thing that Admiral Tucker helped me out on that morning was I had realized in my uniform I didn't have any tissues, and so he handed me a handkerchief and said, "Here, hold on to this, Skipper. You might need it." And it was really for that moment. So if anyone hasn't watched the actual ceremony video, that is probably the best part of the whole video. And so even just hearing you say those words again, little bit of hair standing up on the back of my neck. and that to me was, that's what really made that entire ceremony, really special. I don't think, if you looked at all the commissionings of submarines, both the commissioning pennant, from the decommissioning and then him handing over the looking glass and having those, remarkable words. And I think he's going to be on the podcast at some point as well. And so, I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but, that was a tremendous moment. And, I'll even go as far as to say that, Admiral Tucker had a little bit of influence in me sticking around in the Navy. So he knew that, I was looking at maybe potentially putting in my retirement, and he was one of the first officers really, giving me a hard time about how that was likely a poor decision. So no, that, that whole relationship, that prestige and sort of heritage that he passed, and then, the words that he spoke, and in the manner he spoke. And that's why I said, you really got to watch the video. But let's just say that I'm glad I had a handkerchief in my back pocket.
Admiral Tucker was the first episode of the season. In fact, we actually recorded it 2 days before commissioning day. So when he was in town for commissioning and then came to visit us here at the Battleship. And we sat here, sitting in the captain's import cabin, and we had lunch, and we, walked around the ship for a while and, heard a lot of great stories. And then we recorded the podcast. So it was actually right before commissioning day. But he had some good thoughts on it as well. I can tell you one of my favorite parts of commissioning day, this is a part of the ceremony, other than your shout out to the Battleship. Thank you. Was when you read your orders and you turned around to Admiral Houston and you just say, and forgive me if I'm misspeaking on this, United States Ship New Jersey is in commission and I am in command. It was just so very official in all of the best ways. And I don't know, and then when I later on and a few weeks later when I served on the John Basilone commissioning committee, the DDG, and hearing the same phrase, when, Commander Livingston took command of the ship when it was commissioned, it's something that I just felt was so very official. And I thought helped make it.
No, that's great. That was one of those things when you say it, it sort of just comes natural because it's sort of the role. But watching that, from like a third party perspective, I think I appreciated it more kind of watching it, realizing how that whole interaction went down. So I have to agree with you. I did appreciate that one more, having seen it, but I will say that, the Admiral, Tucker one really seals it for me. So.
Over the past year, really, I mean, we've been lucky enough to become acquainted. Become friends. I've been lucky enough to be acquainted, as you mentioned, with your lovely family, your wife Alyssa, who I think is probably during commissioning week the only person who was more popular than you were. I'm a dad of two.
To be fair, sometimes I get introduced as Alyssa's husband, so no one knows.
In my house. I'm a dad of two. I can't imagine trying to balance my home life while managing a $4.5 billion, the apex predator of the U.S. submarine fleet. Well, first, bravo Zulu to you and all of this crew and the crews across the submarine force who do this. But how do you balance? How do you balance that sort of work? That work family life and an awesome responsibility that you have and that other officers have, and other crew members have.
Well, I'm sure Alyssa would tell you, I will just tell you, I probably don't do it as well as I could. Cause it does, especially when we're gone at sea, that it's not really a balancing act. It's more of, Alyssa sort of just takes the reins on everything. Especially being submarines, it's a lot harder. I could tell you countless stories of when we're deployed, Alyssa having to make decisions, completely by herself, to include the sale and purchase of homes, things that you'd want to kind of bounce these ideas off of your spouse. But, at the end of the day, you have to accept offers and, move.
Sure.
And so, I will tell you, it's the families at home, and especially Alyssa and, their ability to kind of maintain resilience. And I say that again, especially with submariners, there's a lot of programs now, the Navy's, kind of activating where like, you can, have like almost like FaceTime while you're at sea on some of the surface ships if they're not in combat areas. And there's opportunities to do a lot of that. But for submarines, we're still very limited on communications. And so it's probably one of the communities that's the toughest on families. And, Alyssa does it magnificently. She basically single parents for every time I'm gone. And so for my whole command tour, I think, there's a lot of times where, Alyssa was, left to do the brunt of the work. And so I would argue I probably haven't balanced it well. Where I hope to make up for it is, or provide the other half of the balance is, one of the things that benefits from the sea shore rotation is hopefully on shore duty, some of that can kind of be recouped. But I do try to make it a point, like we did a dependence cruise. And so, we got to bring, Alyssa came out, two of my kids, about, a little shy of 30 total dependents were on board. And so they got to see how their sailors operate the submarine and actually got to, see what submarine life was like.
Great.
And that pays dividends, I think, to the families back at home. And it's great that the submarine force, makes that a priority. So there were key people in the chain of command that made that happen to say, hey, we're going to preserve, this one day of operations, for the families. And we're not going to let other, operational commitments sort of, cause that to slide. And so, it's great that from, pretty senior levels, they're supporting that, supporting my desire as the captain to, have the families on board. So I think it's one of those things that you probably can never do enough for all the birthdays and everything and anniversaries that are missed. But I think given the opportunities, try and make those happen. And then, like I said, when given the opportunity to recoup, then, you make it all that important. But, all my kids, having missed a lot of those birthdays and stuff, they're still pretty proud of their dad. And it goes a long way that, they consider themselves just as much as submariners as I am.
Absolutely.
So all the swag that I've got that says New Jersey SSN, Alyssa gets a lot of good swag. The kids all wear that with a lot of pride. And so it's sort of a family effort.
Absolutely. Before we start to wrap up, I want to put on my commissioning committee hat for a second. And, I got to spend, a bit of time, with you guys on the submarine, down in Norfolk and then here, in New Jersey, during commissioning week. And, some of the things that, we try to do as a commissioning committee, what we call the habitability upgrades, and I in particular love sort of all the New Jersey Turnpike signs all up around the boat that are actually real signs and made by the same company that makes them for the Turnpike Authority. This boat is going to be in service for the next 30 years. And as a commissioning committee, our goal was best commissioning ever. I think we fulfilled that. And now our goal is really the best support ever. And, we raised a considerable amount of money and, have, considerable amount, left over to support the crew. What do things like that mean to the crew on sort of an everyday level? And, what are ways that, if you're not a part of the commissioning committee, you're just sitting here listening to this, what are good ways to support, submariners, the New Jersey maybe in particular, but, the sailors who are out there, as you just talked about, who have sacrificed that sort of, home work balance to primarily, be on the work side of things.
Yeah, I think, sailors were never given the opportunity for so let me just make sure I answer your question right, Marshall. Yeah. I think what you're saying is like, hey, what are ways to kind of continue to give to the crew in support of the crew? Yeah. To me, the biggest thing you can do is kind of support their FRG and their MWR effort. So there's a family readiness group that typically does things that are everything from resources and available, things that the families can kind of have access to, so that while their sailors are away, they can kind of lean on the family readiness group. Sometimes they also do some social activities, things to keep the kids engaged, keep the spouses engaged. And so anything that supports the family readiness group directly supports the sailors, their families, and their well-being. Same thing with the MWR, so the morale, welfare, and recreation. So the crew has its own MWR sort of organization. They're responsible to host picnics. So occasionally they'll do, picnics for like crew functions just to kind of have some social events. We did a bowling outing one time. They did a Christmas party. And it's really just a way to kind of, builds a little bit of camaraderie and esprit de corps, internal to the ship, but also, is opportunity a lot of times for the families to come to those events. And those events, really, they kind of get better with the more sort of funding and fundraising they have behind them. And so to me, those are kind of the biggest ways you can kind of support the crew. The crew, obviously, they also do like, I think, recognition, like realizing that, they're doing, a hard job. And, so anytime that they also feel that like people understand, kind of what they're going through means a lot. So I remember, for instance, Mayor Perry of Middletown, they had posted, some flags along, the side of the major road there going into the weapons station. The crew is just floored that like, hey, there's banners up that are showing our support. So it's things like that, almost don't have the same monetary value, but it's a show of, hey, we see you, like New Jersey, like we understand you're out there, doing a lot of hard work. So really, if you're supporting kind of one of those two lines of effort, it goes a lot for the sailors.
What we'll do
I don't know if that answers your question, Marshall.
No, it does. I think, what we'll do is, in the description of this episode, we will post a special link, for anyone who wants to make a donation to either of those, the FRG or the MWR, for the submarine New Jersey. We will take that money here at the Battleship and we will donate 100% of all of that money that anyone wants to donate, and make sure that gets to the crew, because you're right. We have to continue to support it. Commissioning week's over. And we did a lot of really amazing things, but we also have a lot of new crew on the boat who weren't necessarily at commissioning just in September. So we want to make sure that they are, that they feel supported as well. So we'll absolutely do that. You mentioned earlier, when we were talking about Admiral Tucker for a second, that, you had planned on retiring and getting out of the Navy and becoming a civilian. You've obviously changed course. I know you sort of recounted, you talked about Admiral Tucker's influence in there, and I was really thankful to be down at the change of command at Norfolk in December, and you talked about Admiral Houston's influence on you staying. So you were relieved in December. You are now at a new assignment. What is that assignment, and what do you have going in the future, if you're able to share?
Yeah, so I've just been recently assigned to U.S. Fleet Forces Command as the senior inspector for the Nuclear Propulsion Examining Board. So normally there's a team of, for submarines, 4 inspectors that conduct, routine inspections on all of our nuclear powered vessels. And so, we basically provide an assessment about, just safety protocol and policies, guideline procedures, their training program, things like that. And so I'm part of that team for probably the next 18 months. So there's sort of 2 teams on the East Coast, 2 teams on the West Coast, and then when there's a carrier inspection, both sections of the team, because just the size of the engineering department, all support those examinations. So that'll be sort of the battle rhythm, a lot of travel, a lot of seeing different submarines and different aircraft carriers operate. So that kind of what the lay of the land looks like for the next 18 months. And the other thing is just wanted to give a shout out to the crew of New Jersey. They were awarded the 2024 Battle Efficiency Award. So they won the Battle E Award. And a lot of that's the hard work they did on the delivery alpha trials. They knocked all the trials out of the park. We also did, one of our inspections with only 2 days, at sea operation time. And they did really well on that inspection. And so, it's great to see that recognition, for all the hard work that they put in.
Can you explain briefly what the Battle E is? Because we have one here at the Battleship, and it's painted very large on one of our smokestacks, and we get asked very often what that means. So it'd be great if you could actually explain what that means.
Yeah, so the Battle Efficiency Award, awarded annually, and normally it's for the calendar year, really just goes for the top performing, either squadron or ship in that, squadron or wing. So it can be awarded to aviation squadrons, can be awarded to ships or submarines, and so they all have a, destroyer squadron or a submarine squadron. So, among your peers, you're a top performer and specifically demonstrating war fighting readiness for combat. And so sometimes that's just as simple as, hey, you're meeting all the mission tasking by getting through all of your delivery trials and meeting certification so that you could be surged into combat when ready. So again, it's sort of competitive among that group, and then 1 year, for example, on Hartford, they actually won the Battenberg Cup. That's where then, the different squadrons and submarines and aircraft carriers, different units go on to contend for who's the top Battle E winner. So who knows? Maybe later in 2025, we'll hear that there's a next higher up going to New Jersey. But normally, when you're not seeing a lot of combat operations, deployed operations, it's hard to contend against those who are, actually putting, ordnance out, taking down drones and other things. So, but no, it's good to see that New Jersey got that recognition for all their hard work that last calendar year.
I got one last and final question. I almost neglected to ask you something I'm asking of everybody. This is the WETSU podcast. We eat this stuff up or something, as you can imagine. Any particular doing hard work, grueling work with a smile on your face. Really, that's the meaning of it. Is there any particular WETSU moment that comes to mind from either your time on the New Jersey or just really, during your career in the Navy?
Oh, absolutely. No, and I think, and so I told the crew more about this because it came up at commissioning, and then I think more people had seen the battle flag. And there were some times shortly after commissioning, we were doing a lot of our trials in and around a couple of the hurricanes that were going through Florida and the Gulf. And so we had a lot of schedule churn. We had to do a lot of operations in heavy weather. And so a couple of times our schedules, got canceled, got redone. And, it was almost like the crew never knew what the next week was going to hold because it was contingent on the next 3 days of bad weather. And so that's when I kind of, started going to the crew. I was like, it's all right. Let the weather bring what they want. We eat this stuff up, and so I got some of them to sort of kind of get behind the WETSU motto.
Oh, I love that.
And they appreciated that because, it was pretty grueling just not knowing, because we didn't know at that time when we're going to be back with our families. We didn't know what the next event schedule or what our schedule shift was going to be. And so, it was a great testament to say, hey, it doesn't matter. Keep bringing us hurricanes, keep throwing it all at us. We eat up the hard. If it's difficult, send it our way. And so the WETSU was sort of what I was preaching during those moments.
I love that. Well, you were in State 21, seaman to admiral. So we're glad that you didn't get out of the Navy because you still need to get that star, and we will gladly host that promotion ceremony here on the Battleship New Jersey. But Commander Steve Halle, it's good to see you, my friend. Thank you very much for your time today. Your service to our country, our state, our USS New Jersey, which we honor and we love. So thank you very much.
Great. No, hey, thanks again, Marshall. I enjoy doing this and talking with you. And like I said, I want to keep the relationship with the Battleship, alive, and anything I can do to support that, I appreciate it.
Thank you.